You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Do you want to experience the thrill of a Packers game at Lambeau Field? If so, be sure to get your guaranteed authentic tickets from theticketking.com, a longtime trusted source and local Green Bay business. Just go to packerstalk.com/tickets for more information and ticket links. That's packerstalk.com/tickets.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans that just love talking about the Pack. We're here weekly with you guys. We're not getting into national sports media talking points. We're talking about real football. We're going to dive into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down the games during the season and sorting through all the drama and the rumors of the offseason, which we are now in. Tim, good evening, sir. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button. Follow us. Do all the things that take you just mere seconds and are very, very beneficial to us. We greatly appreciate it. How you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing well. We got ourselves a new defensive coordinator since the last time we talked, so very exciting news. So, yeah, doing well and jumping right into the offseason, which is crazy. A lot of stuff going on with the coaching staff now. So, yeah, lots for us to talk about. How about you? How you doing this evening?
Yes, sir. Now, we got some breaking news here tonight, man. Did you see that? We got a new defensive passing game coordinator here.
Yeah.
Derek Ansley. Just real quick on Derek, he was the defensive coordinator for the Chargers in a very disappointing 2023 season. Not sure that he takes all of that blame. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But he is not the defensive coordinator in this situation. He is a passing game coordinator? How did they describe him?
Yeah, passing whatever that.
Yeah, so he'll
whatever that means exactly. Because they have a DB's coach, which is Ryan Downer, who they're keeping, and now a passing game coordinator. So maybe he's going to be more of a focus on the corners. Who knows? But whatever you want to call it, yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting development, man. Do you have any kind of thoughts on Mr. Ansley right out of the gate?
Yeah, I mean, like you touched on, he was defensive coordinator for the Chargers. He didn't call the plays. Staley did, Brandon Staley, until when Staley was fired. Then he took over and called the plays for the last, few games of the season. So you can't really put much into that.
Yeah.
But I know, just from reading up on him real quick, he's been with the Chargers for 3 years coaching DBs. And before that, he spent 1 year with the Raiders, but he's been like a longtime college coach, Alabama, Tennessee, I think Kentucky too. Coaching DBs. I think he was briefly defensive coordinator at Tennessee. So he's a DB guy. We know that. And that's probably where his focus is going to be as the pass game coordinator. So I think he's about 41 or 42 years old too. So a little bit on the younger side. But yeah, it's, he'll work in the secondary, I'm sure. Ryan Downer, like I said, is staying on as defensive backs coach, but he's been primarily like coaching the safety. So I'm guessing Ainsley's going to be more so with the corners and kind of bringing it all together. But hey, he's got defensive coordinator experience. He's got college and pro experience. He's worked under Nick Saban. He's worked under Brandon Staley. He's run his own defense. So he's got kind of a little bit of a diverse background there. So, and he's, from outside the Packers, Matt LaFleur kind of background, which is, could be beneficial too. It gives him a different set of eyes and a different voice in there. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's positive development, and they only end up keeping two guys from the prior defensive coaching staff. So I think that's good too. I think they obviously needed some changes there, not just Joe Barry, but beyond that with the coaching staff. So yeah. So definitely excited about that. And yeah, we'll see what Ainsley's primary role is going to be. But as of now, what the report is defensive passing game coordinator. So that's pretty cool. And Yeah, I think it's he came from Staley, so that's a little bit of a different background, at least for the last few years he's been under Staley, than what Jeff Hafley's been. So maybe it's, mixing some of what he's learned from Brandon Staley and bringing that into the Packers' new scheme.
Well, and I know Brandon Staley was not a favorite choice for the DC role for the Packers this offseason.
No.
But he had success as a defensive coordinator, as a defensive mind. So, I mean, there is some value, knowledge, and, just something of substance there that could have been taken from him. Fun, interesting fact about Derek Ansley. He comes from the Division III football ranks. For the Division III fans out there, I know there's a lot of them in Packers world because Division III is big in Wisconsin. Fun fact, though, and I've said this before, I played at Oshkosh for a few years there and actually played against Derek Ansley's team. So,
oh, nice. There you go.
Have been on the same field. Obviously had no idea what kind of career trajectory he was on at that point, but just kind of interesting to see that happening. Lance Leopold's another one that was in the D3 ranks there for a while and now is making some noise on a higher level. So always fun to shout out some D3 football, just a good brand of hard-nosed football out there. So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting fact, but he's been with the Chargers for 3 seasons. He was their defensive backs coach for a few seasons. He was also the Raiders defensive backs coach in 2018. He's been in college for a while, a couple years, 2010, 2011 at Alabama, 12 at Tennessee, 13, 14, 15 at Kentucky, back to Alabama in 16 and 17. And all of these gigs are as a defensive backs coach. So it does seem like defensive backs are his forte, and should be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to go back and look at those college rosters that he coached defensive backs and see who came out of there.
I was just thinking that I'm like, if he was at Alabama for, especially the second couple of years, he probably coached some future first round picks or future pros. So it'd be interesting. Like, we just got the news here as we go live, so I haven't had a chance to look into what the rosters were, but I'm sure he coached some guys who were playing in the NFL, developed those guys. So that's that's what you want. You want somebody that can develop your guys and be a teacher to them.
Exactly. I mean, that was one of our biggest complaints about Joe Barry, right? Is we saw players play very well and then kind of regress under Joe Barry. So hopefully we see the opposite of that here. But, man, Derek Ansley's not the headliner here since our last podcast. That would be Jeff Hafley, man. Who is Jeff Hafley, by the way? I know that Packers Twitter has had some time to do some digging on this guy. Shout out to some of our other Packers podcast counterparts. They've done some great work on this guy. I'm trying to get it pulled up so I can give some credit where it's due on these guys. But
Dusty Evely and Andy Herman.
Yeah, well, and
great work.
There's another. I don't want to misquote him. I'm going to get your name right, though, dude. I'm going to say it, and we'll give you the right credit here eventually. But there was another guy who went back. He did some, some research and some journalism work. Really, he interviewed some folks at Ohio State and Boston College. We've seen video come out from Hafley's time at Ohio State and at Boston College. So there's some good information out there about him. One thing that I said right out of the gate, and it's funny because we've got another new coach who was added, I believe it was today, maybe it was yesterday, the linebackers coach out of Miami. And I was just thinking, we had Barry for 3 years, and I didn't get a single clip from him, not a single one, that made me want to run through a wall. Not one. We couldn't get a practice clip, a training camp clip, some kind of chippy news or press conference, none of it. Couldn't get anything from him. And now we've got a new DC, and we've got some, new position coaches, and we've already got multiple videos that got me looking for brick walls to run through. And I'm just pumped about these guys. Like they in a lot of ways are definitely the antithesis of Joe Barry, but from a perspective of personality, one thing that kind of we started talking about mid-season this year is like, look, we get it. Joe Barry's a nice guy. Like, everybody just loves him. He's like the seems like the best a man could be. But is that a good defensive coordinator? Like, is a nice guy a good defensive coordinator? And that was the question I was kind of asking myself through this season. And now I'm looking at this, and not to say that these guys aren't nice guys, but they certainly have a not nice side. And I really like that for a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and they seem like they're motivators. I mean, you can look at there's the Hard Knocks clip that was going around all day today for the new linebacker coach, Anthony. I think it's Campanelli or Campanile.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, from Miami, and that's interesting. I mean, you can just watch the Hard Knocks clips. It's pretty damn cool. I mean, like you said, you want to run through a wall for the guy, but he was in Miami. What's interesting is he was interviewed actually the last 2 years for defensive coordinator jobs with the Dolphins and passed over. And there were other teams that wanted to bring him in as a position coach. He interviewed for the Giants defensive coordinator job. Vic Fangio, who was the Dolphins defensive coordinator in 2023, left. He's with the Eagles now. He wanted to bring him to Philadelphia with him. So there wasn't like real connection with LaFleur or even with Hafley, but he decided to go to Green Bay. So, I mean, I think that's a good sign for Hafley and LaFleur. It's also a good sign that Campanelli lasted in Miami. He lasted through 2 head coaches and 2 or 3 different defensive coordinators there. So he had, staying power there. And he has also got kind of a diverse background. He was a college guy at Rutgers and had bounced around a little bit before the Dolphins, but seems to be a, highly respected guy. He's getting, like I said, defensive coordinator interviews, hasn't gotten a job yet, but he's probably, a future defensive coordinator in the league. So to be able to get him out of Miami and be the linebacker coach, I think is really good move again for the Packers. And they put together what looks to be very nice defensive staff, some younger up and coming guys, but not younger where they don't have much experience. They actually do. And have some diverse backgrounds, which is pretty cool too.
Definitely. And so it's exciting to see the staff come together. Yeah. I think a lot of times that gets overlooked, that these position coaches and how important that they can be. But let's take a quick look back at the last Packers Super Bowl team and dive into those position coaches and who they were. Joe Witt Jr., now defensive coordinator out of in Washington, long overdue. You also had Kevin Green coaching up your outside linebackers, and then you had I can't remember the D-line coach. I think it was Turgovec or something like that. Yeah. He was a former defensive coordinator. You had just deep talent across your position coaches in that Super Bowl team, and I think that that's something that we should pay attention to, right? I mean, as these guys start to come in and you can compare them to the other guys that were here, not to, hate on the guys that were here, but it seems like there's a real upgrade here. It seems like these guys really come with specific skill sets that we have been hungry for. So give me your synopsis, sir. Now that we've had some time to take in who is Jeff Hafley, what can we expect from a Jeff Hafley defense this season?
So, I mean, just going back to when the news broke, really surprised by it. I mean, it was not, we had done a podcast the day Joe Barry was fired, and we threw out a bunch of names. Wasn't a name we brought up. Right. Didn't see his name anywhere else for, possible candidate, either in Green Bay or anywhere else across the NFL. So complete shock when they hired him. But I kind of knew the name going back to when he was at Ohio State. I'm a Penn State fan. So he took over Ohio State, and their defense wasn't very good when he got there. And like everybody talks about all the talent they have. They had the talent. They just weren't good. And in one season, he made them the number 1 defense in the country. Yeah. Which was, maybe it's not all him, maybe it's the talent, but he had a big role in that. Yeah. And I remember saying that, I'm like, man, this guy's good, because he came from the 49ers, but he was a DB coach. He didn't have like a high profile. So it was like, who's Ohio State getting? And he turns him around 1 year and then gets Boston College job. Yeah. And he just seemed like this dude's, he knows how to coach. He's an up and comer. And then, I don't watch Boston College. I'm sure you don't. Most people don't watch Boston
Not a lot.
College football. No. So he spent 4 years there and they made 3 bowl games, but like it's tough to win there. They don't have a high ceiling. Getting to a bowl game is kind of what you can expect. If they win 9 games, that's a great year for them. It's a tough program. And I know there's been some talk last couple of years haven't gone as well for him, and maybe he was on the hot seat going into 2024 anyhow. But what he's done before Boston College was really good. And he came up as a DB coach like Ainsley is. And I think that's what we're going to see is we're going to see the DBs and the corners have a much different look under Hafley than they had under Joe Barry. But he came up as a DB coach. He's got a diverse background. He was in Cleveland, or before he even got to Cleveland, he was at Rutgers under Greg Schiano and at Tampa Bay with Greg Schiano. Then he goes to Cleveland under Pettin, where he meets Kyle Shanahan. So after Cleveland, he jumps with Chip Kelly. When Chip Kelly spent 1 year at the 49ers, Chip Kelly's out. They bring Kyle Shanahan in, and Shanahan decides to keep him on staff. And he learns the Robert Saleh defense, which, obviously Saleh leaves. D'Amico Ryans picks it up. It's, after Ryans, Steve Wilkes is now there. It's just continually been a really good defense because of the system in place. Saleh runs it with the Jets. It's a really good defense there too. So he learned that, goes to Ohio State, turns him around in 1 year, does a pretty decent job at Boston College, but he's got a really nice diversified background where you see some different, is he going to be 3-4, 4-3 has been the big thing. It's probably going to be more 4-3, but and we'll talk about that. I don't think it's going to matter a whole lot.
Right.
But he'll do some different blitz looks. He'll give you some different third down packages that we don't see with Joe Barry.
Right.
They play press man. At certain times, they played a lot of press man. Now you got to do both. You can't just be exclusively press man because,
right.
Teams it'll be man beaters and you're going to get beat with it.
Oh yeah.
But he knows how to coach. He knows how to coach defensive backs, and it's a passing league. You got to be really good in pass rush and pass coverage. And I think at least the pass coverage part of it, he's going to be able to coach it up and have a scheme that's diversified and able to adapt game to game and within the game, which is what we didn't see with Barry.
Yeah.
He makes good use of the players that he has and gets the most out of them. And you can go back and you can just listen. There's a really good podcast that he did actually right before he was hired by the Packers with Adam Brenneman, where he talks about he learned a lot. He learned more from the players he coached than the coaches he coached with. As far as how they see things. And one of those guys was Richard Sherman. Like he learned more about how to play zone coverage from Richard Sherman than he learned from coaches, because you're seeing it from a player's point of view. They're the guys that are actually out on the field running it. And so what they can tell him about what's being run, what he's calling, and get the players' feedback is helping him as a coach. He said he learned a lot from Rondé Barber when he was in Tampa, guys like that. And I think that's really cool to hear that and how he's able to adapt his scheme and prepare his team week to week. And it's not just, we're going to run the same coverages, the same defense. We got used to that with Joe Barry. I think they're going to be more diversified. I think as far as like everybody wants to figure out like what's he going to play. Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot more 4-3 than we've seen. But everybody's running nickel and dime anyway. I don't think it's going to be this huge difference. Like I go back to when Capers took over and they went from a 4-3 to 3-4. And I think at that time it was a lot more base. So you did see a big difference with how they were using guys. I don't think it's going to be quite that kind of difference. And we can talk about that. And, as the offseason goes on and we kind of figure out more of what they're going to do, I think where the differences are going to be is the coverage differences. And, obviously with the struggles they've had there, particularly this year in the secondary, that's going to be welcome. And I think they're going to need really good safety play and to develop the corners. Carrington Valentine, I think this is a really good hire for Valentine, for Stokes if he can stay healthy, and for Jair. Like this is probably the defense that you want to see Jair play in.
Yeah.
And I think he can make the most out of it. So yeah, I think initially it was like, wow, this was really out of left field. Like who's Jeff Hafley? Like what? Like definitely not somebody that was on our radar. But as I dove into it, it was like, yeah, I'm really excited to see what he brings and what, how he can blend all of his backgrounds to create this defense. And I think it's going to be a lot of what we see with Robert Saleh, what he's run with the 49ers and Jets. I think it's going to be a lot of that system. and you can see the success it's had.
Well, that should excite Packers fans because,
Yeah.
I think it's clear to say, like, we all would have really been excited to have Saleh. When you get beat by somebody like that guy so many times, you want him on your team.
Yeah.
But I would say this, and this is something that kind of floated around at the early part of the news breaking on the Hafley hire, is that everybody immediately assumed that he and LaFleur were good buddies. And apparently that's not necessarily the case. Like, they're more acquaintances and aware of each other. And, obviously LaFleur has a pretty strong network across football in general. But this seems like a guy that was hired because he was recommended by the people that have LaFleur's ear, right? And so if you're in a profession, right? I mean, this is one of those times where you can kind of apply this to anybody's working environment, right? You got to hire somebody. Okay, well, you're in an industry and you got buddies across the industry who have had success in this industry, and they say, hey, this is the guy that you want. You're going to listen to him, right? I mean, you're not going to be like, well, I mean, maybe, and I can't because I might know him, no, like you're going to take the advice from the people that that have had success. So that to me is probably how this played out. It seems like, based on what I read, is that's how it played out. He came highly recommended by Shanahan, among others. And you mentioned Richard Sherman. He actually had really high praise about the hire specifically. Yeah. Richard Sherman was a good DB, but I think what's important to note is he's really smart. Richard Sherman's not your average Bear. Yeah. The man, I believe, had a 4.0 at Stanford. Like, he's a sharp dude. So to hear Hafley say that he learned things from Sherman, yeah, I believe that. I definitely believe that, and I like that. Can you think of anybody that Barry ever said he learned from? I can't. I don't ever remember any of those kinds of tidbits, talking points, whatever you want to call them, coming out about Barry. And now that we think about it, and we're getting all this information, even about these position coaches, man, you didn't get any of this from Barry. None of it. We didn't get the motivational speeches. We didn't get the hype from other people like Richard Sherman and other coaches. You didn't get the podcasts, the interviews, all the information we're getting about Hafley and some of these other guys. You just didn't ever get anything like that from Joe Barry. All we heard was he's a super nice guy, which is great. And I wish him all the best as the linebackers coach in Miami. But it feels like maybe Joe Barry was really, really almost overachieving with what he was doing with the Packers, which is sort of hard to say because we definitely weren't happy with the results that he was getting. But this seems like the group of guys that they have now seem like they really have a pedigree behind them, like a real brand of defensive football that you can look at and go, oh, that's what these guys do. Like, I never got that from Joe Barry. I never got like, well, he's this guy. He does this. Except for the too high shell of, just being afraid to get torched like that. That was about it.
Yeah.
So I'm just very encouraged by a lot of the peripherals, a lot of the just sort of the stuff that's surrounding the situation. A lot of times you can learn a lot from those types of things. But yeah, man, everything that you said, I'm very, very excited to see how he works with these DBs. You've got a ton of talent there. And so I think this is a good time to sort of transition a little bit into a little bit more of our offseason talks, because I don't know that Packers Twitter agrees that we got a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball. And not that we have to. We're all just a bunch of fans shouting our opinions into the ether. But in what we have talked about and focused on, and kind of like what I've looked at, you have talented players that you've seen play. You want to see the best come out of them, and now it seems like we are going to get that, which is very, very exciting. You do certainly have to add talent to this roster. You need safeties. We've seen how quickly DBs get injured, right? So having a Jair, a Stokes, and a Valentine still wasn't enough. So, yeah, you have to add pieces. You have to add depth. But it is so encouraging now to see that, all right, well, maybe a Stokes isn't necessarily written off. Maybe a Savage isn't written off, right? And so I would say, Packers fans, if you've written off any of these players, Savage, Stokes, even Jair Alexander, pump the brakes. Just stop right where you are and just be willing to see what this coaching staff does with those players. Have an open mind because, we have seen these players be great, and coaching has a great deal of impact on that. So who do you think, man? Let's kind of look at the roster. We know that some of these players are gone. Some of them hopefully will come back. I'm not even going to ask who you think. What do you think the odds they re-sign Darnell Savage are?
That's a good question. I think they're decent, actually. It depends on what the new staff sees of his role in the defense. Like, if they think he can play a certain role for them, whether that's closer to the line of scrimmage, whether that's a safety that's going to shoot down, which is probably what he's better as, is like a robber in the middle of the field coming down. If they think they can use that, I could see him signing like a 1 year, fairly cheap deal to kind of come in and improve his value so that maybe next year he can go back and get a bigger deal from someone else or with the Packers, whatever it may be. I just go back to, like, he was a first-round pick. He was a Goody first-round pick. And I don't know if Goody wants to give up on him just yet. Like, I almost feel like maybe they want to give him another chance in a new system with a new scheme where they think they can take better advantage of his tools. So wouldn't surprise me at all if they bring him back. Wouldn't surprise me if he's gone. Like, there was a point in the season where I'm like, yeah, there's no way they're going to bring this guy back. Now I'm kind of like on the fence. I think if the money's right and it's a 1 year deal, I think they bring him back, but I think it's got to be at the Packers price. But yeah, I could definitely, like, right now they don't really have a safety. They're all either free agents or Anthony Johnson Jr., who's the 7th round pick who didn't get to play much. So you need guys. And I definitely expect him to take a safety probably within the first 2 days of the draft, but you still need another one. So, is it Savage? Is it Jonathan Owens? Is it Rudy Ford? Like, are you going to try to throw money at another safety in free agency, which maybe they do?
Winfield.
And what's that?
Winfield.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the ultimate. But I think that'll be a decision, like, as they get closer to free agency, they can see, like, who's really becoming available and what's it going to cost for some of these guys. But yeah, I think Savage is more of a possibility now with a new system and a new scheme than he probably was earlier in the year. So yeah, it's possible. If you're asking me, like, what do I think? I would say like 20-30% that I could see him back, maybe more.
I think I'm going higher than that.
Yeah, it depends on how they see him. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he's back. And you need two safeties, so there's something they see in him and they think they can use him properly, then okay. I would like to get better than that, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's back next year.
Yeah, I'd probably put it at like 40 to 60%. And it's interesting because these things used to be a lot more predictable. But the safety market is kind of like the running back market.
Yeah, they don't get paid.
They don't get paid. They don't seem to have a high priority. It's kind of strange to me because it seems like a very important position, even more so than the running back position. So I'm not sure really how to expect them to value this. Like you said, Savage is a Goody pick, right? A first-round pick, right? So Goody definitely saw something in him, and that wasn't that long ago. He's not 100%. He's pretty damn good, but he's not 100% on his draft pick, so it's certainly possible, Savage just didn't quite cut it. But I go back to when you've seen guys be good and then you see them regress, there's a reason for that. Sometimes it's injuries. A lot of times it's coaching, man. Environment is a big deal, right? But And I saw a quote from Savage. I think it might have been last week, maybe just a few days ago. Somebody asked him, "Are you nervous?" He said, "No, I'm not nervous." And he loves Green Bay. And he almost sounded like he already has an offer to stay in Green Bay. He didn't say that, but the tone and like the way that he worded it, it sounded like he already knows that he's staying. So take that for what we will. But yeah, I mean, when you look at him, you look at his tape at Maryland, you look at some of the best play that he had with the Packers, he's a damn good safety. And even if it's just for continuity purposes in the DB room to have at least one veteran safety from, before this next season, I think he'd be a good addition. Obviously, you said you got Anthony Johnson Jr., and Goody's pretty good at those 7th-round picks, man. It's almost like nobody else is coming to work, and he is in the 7th round. But, when you get a guy like Valentine and you also got a guy that might be your franchise left tackle that came out of the 7th round, it's like, why not Anthony Johnson Jr.?
Yeah, and he might be good. It's just he barely played, so I don't know if you can count on him. I think he should be in the mix, but you don't know what you have there.
Yeah, you don't know. So, and that's why I would say just the tools that Savage has. He's very fast. Let's not forget that. He's a 4.3 guy.
Yeah.
He is a tackler. Like if you go and look at his highlights, there are highlights of him making some real man tackles. There's criticism of him missing tackles and criticism of he's out of place and this and that. You have to leave room for the possibility that was because of coaching. And the GM's going to know that, right? Like the guys in the building know these players better than anybody. So yeah, it really does come down to what do they think of him. And based on Savage's remarks, he sounds pretty confident. He doesn't sound like a guy, and we've heard it before. We've heard guys before, I think even last offseason, guys that I'd like to stay, but I haven't heard anything from the front office, They haven't talked to me at all. And that's unfortunate. I think that, we all obviously got a taste of that with Aaron Rodgers and his grievances, but that wasn't Savage's tone and when he was asked this question most recently. So we'll see what goes on there, but let's get into some fun talk here. And this can be a good segue, and we could talk more about some of these players, but man, what's your optimism level right now as a Packers fan, Tim?
I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, it's pretty high up there. There's still, we're just starting the offseason, so who knows who's going to be acquired in the offseason, who knows who's going to leave, like all that stuff. But just coming off of 2023, I mean, they have a quarterback and they have a lot of potential weapons on offense, and that's really, really exciting. We saw how the offense came together over the second half of the season. That's awesome. The defense is the big unknown, but now we know who the coordinator is going to be. We don't know what it's going to look like on the field. We don't know what the results are going to be. But I feel pretty confident right now. They're going to be more aggressive, and it's going to be a more situationally aware defense than what they had under Joe Barry.
It's hard to get worse.
Yeah. So that, it gets me excited. I like the Hafley hire. I'm optimistic about what he can bring. I'm optimistic that LaFleur seemed to hire the coach and not the system. Yes. It felt like when he went out and got Barry, he wanted somebody that was from the Fangio tree. And it seemed like he ultimately settled on Barry because he had previous defensive coordinator experience, whereas Ejiro Evero, who was the other finalist, did not. That was a mistake, obviously. This time it just felt like he went out and hired the coach, the guy who he saw as the best fit as far as what they could do. Right. And it even feels like that with the staff because they're hiring some guys that they don't really have direct ties with. Mm-hmm. It's not like, I know Hafley brought his defensive line coach, but he's the assistant defensive line coach.
Yeah.
So, Ainsley, Campanelli, they're not guys that, were buddies with Hafley and are coming from his scheme. So you're kind of hiring the coach.
Yeah.
And it seems like these coaches are developers and teachers, which is really awesome and exciting. So I'm optimistic about the defense. There's a long way to go. We got to see what kind of scheme they're going to play, what their, what the philosophy is going to be defensively. And they need some players on defense, but overall for the team, yeah, I'm really optimistic at this point. I can't, it feels like it's been months since they played a football game, where it's been 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Like, I can't wait for training camp. And we're not even like through the long off season of the draft and free agency and then mini camp and like all that stuff that feels like it takes years to get through. And it already feels like it's been a long time. Like, I can't wait for the end of July and training camp. It's exciting. So to answer your question, yeah, I'm very optimistic. I don't want to put numbers on it or what they could be, but
Super Bowl or bust, Tim.
Let's see what they build on defense. But I'm with you. Sky's the limit. The sky's the limit offensively, and we'll see what the defense is going to be. But yeah, I'm very optimistic right now.
Absolutely. No, I'm Super Bowl or bust, man. I look at this and shout out to Rev Trev. He and I had some back and forth on the Twitter app about this, and he's an excellent Packers fan. Y'all follow him on Twitter, but he was a little bit reserved on another podcast about his optimism for next season, and I came in and I was like, nah, man, I have zero reservations. Super Bowl or bust. And here's why. I mean, you could make the argument you're one Darnell Savage interception drop away from competing for a Super Bowl against a team you could probably beat. Now, do you beat the Lions? Or hey, any given Sunday, right? Like, they have to play the game, right? I'm not going to say, oh, you definitely beat the Lions. You can't say that. But you can. You can beat the Lions. We're not looking at the Lions in the NFC Championship game the way that we looked at the 49ers. It's like, ooh, can we beat them? I don't know. And you answered that question. Like, dang, we can beat the 49ers? Man, if you can beat the 49ers in San Francisco, you're going toe-to-toe with anybody in the NFC right now. Anybody. I mean, seriously, what is a harder game in the NFC than San Francisco in San Francisco right now?
There's not.
There's not one. You can't say Philly.
No.
Right?
I think the two best teams were in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair thing to say, for sure. But yeah, I mean, when I look at that and I go, okay, well, we were that close. Well, all right, you had the youngest roster in the league. They're going to get another offseason under their belt of lifting, getting stronger, faster. Like that's still happening. And they're going to be, studying it up. They're in the film room. They're doing the shorts workouts, right? It's short season. So now we have all off season to look forward to videos of guys in shorts and fans going, "Oh, he's going to dominate this year because he can do something in shorts." That's where we are. But yeah, I mean, it's like you get a full off season. You basically return the entire roster, and Goot's got 11 picks in the draft.
Was it 5 in the top 100?
Man.
And he's got a quarterback.
He has a quarterback.
You mentioned the Niners and the Lions. Our quarterback's better.
Yes. And I get it. Everybody, that's this fun back and forth about Brock Purdy right now. Jordan Love's better. Sorry, guys.
Better.
He's better. Argue with a brick wall if you think I'm wrong. He's better. He's got more ability than Brock Purdy. Not saying Brock Purdy's bad. You don't get this far if you're bad. No. But there's degrees of good, right? Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. Trent Dilfer's not in the conversation for greatest quarterback of all time. Not even close. Not sniffing it. So yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, the optimism level for me is through the roof. And if that's crazy, then I'm the leader of the nut house. And that was my comment to Rev Trev. But yeah, when you've got all these things going for you right now, I mean, really, this is better than where we were in the 2020 offseason where everybody was all up in arms because they drafted Jordan Love and you were only, one player away from the Super Bowl, apparently. And that to me, I'm like, seriously, let's compare these two because everybody's optimism in the offseason of 2020 was nuts, right? We were definitely going to the Super Bowl next year. Should have been in the Super Bowl this year, right? That's how people were thinking. So I'm looking at this going, guys, this is a better situation to be in. We are better off right now. Your team is younger. and they're all coming back. You don't have any of this like Aaron Rodgers nonsense, no drama, there's no risk. And now watch, I say this and they're going to find a way to jinx it. There is no risk of Goody drafting somebody that's going to cause a problem this offseason. That's the way I see it. I say that.
They're not taking a quarterback in the first round?
Well, here's what I'll say, and this is more for tongue-in-cheek than anything else. But the quarterback class in this draft looks pretty deep. And Goody drafts from deep positions in the draft class. So could he take a quarterback? Yes, not in the first round. He's not going to do it in the first round. If he's in the position that he was in 2020, where it's like, hey, we got one guy left with a first-round grade and it's a quarterback, he's trading out of that spot.
Please.
He's not taking that guy. What?
Can we just have one off season and no drama?
I think we have it. I even tweeted earlier. Is that like, aren't we glad that Shefty the Clown isn't tweeting about Packers nonsense this offseason? He's over there bugging the Bears. I love it. I love it. I think we have a quiet offseason. That's why I'm looking at this going, hey, guys, I know like we all think it's too early. It's not. It's not. Let's enjoy this. But yeah, for me, the optimism's through the roof. You've like I said, you've got a lot of guys coming back, basically the whole offense. The defense with the talent that it has, you should get better. Now, what we should brace ourselves for is the first half of the season could be ugly on defense, right? You might actually have the inverse of what you had in 2023, where the defense looked like they were competent and the offense couldn't tie their shoes. I don't think the defense will look that bad where they can't tie their shoes, but you're definitely going to have confusion, right? There's going to be, wait, you called what? Well, I thought this was that. That's going to happen. You're bringing in a new defensive system that's going to be new terminologies, new formations, new strategies, new concepts. You're going to have that confusion. So what we have to do is basically say the first 8 games, leave it alone. If the defense sucks in the first 8 games, leave it alone. And it was, the big joke is obviously everybody's already, Packers Twitter is already fire Hafley, right? They've got the hashtag ready. But that's what I would say. It's like, yeah, you could have a rough start to this next season and the schedule's going to be tough. So what? That doesn't mean anything. I just think the way that we're looking here, this really feels like the second half of 2024, this team, like I said, optimism through the roof.
So you're telling me the whole, confusion before the snap, confusion as the ball snapped, guys pointing at each other and then blown coverages and they're all like looking at each other. That's not going away with Joe Barry. I'm kidding. I know, at least I think there's going to be
very careful about not jinxing it.
I think there's going to be growing pains early. Like, I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's going to be, as they get used to it. So it's going to be really important for the staff to teach their system and develop it and to really be clear on the communication. And hopefully they're much better communicating it and getting it done so that in training camp, they can kind of really build it up for the season. Because I agree. I think there's a chance, the beginning of the year that the defense is a work in progress till the players kind of figure out what they're doing and the coaches figure out exactly how to use these guys. Like, it's one thing to look at film and to figure it out in the off season, or they think you figure it out in the off season. And then when you start playing the games and actually seeing these guys live against other teams in real games, it's a different thing and it's a bigger adjustment. So yeah, I agree with it, which means the offense is going to have to carry them. It's going to have to hit the ground running from day one. They can't have any of this slow starting, games where they're only good in the third quarter, like we saw numerous times this season. So it's going to be more on the offense, at least early in the year. And I guess what you hope to see from the defense is just building through the season and getting better as it goes on. And almost kind of like what the offense was this season. Like, you just want to see progress through the year. So yeah. But I think now they have the offense where we should expect them to be more consistent next year, because it's going to be another year as a starter for Jordan Love, his second year. It's going to, these rookies and second year guys now have played NFL games. the speed of it shouldn't affect them. Like now it's time to be consistent, and it's about developing, and it's about these guys staying healthy because they played an entire season without all of their starters playing together healthy, which is pretty incredible.
It really is.
Not even a single game with everybody this season. So
yeah.
The optimism for me offensively is sky high, but it's now like, all right, you got to do it now. You're no longer young. I mean, you're young, but you're no longer inexperienced. You've been there.
Yeah.
So let's go. And early in the year, you're probably going to have to pick up the slack as the defense learns this new scheme.
Yeah, no, and I think that's probably how it's going to play out. And the thing that's exciting about that is the offense looks capable, right? They look like they should take that step, and you're not asking yourself, all right, well, is Jordan Love going to get with these guys in the offseason? Like, what's he doing? No question. He's going to. He's already said he's going to. He did it last offseason. He said he's going to do it this offseason. Now, instead of 1- and 2-year guys, you've got 2- and 3-year guys. And on the defense, the reason that you can be optimistic that the growing pains would be less than what you had on offense is because you have guys on that defense. They're not trying to figure out how to be in the NFL. They've been in the NFL, right? I mean, and you got upstanding leaders in there, right? Like you got Preston Smith, you got Alexander, you got Campbell, you got Clark. I mean, there's some really strong veteran leadership on that defense, and that helps to make those growing pains a little less obvious, maybe, reduce the learning curve a little bit. Whereas on the offense last year, man, I mean, these guys, half of them were trying to figure out what life was like in the NFL, and then they were also trying to learn a new offense. So I get it. It's tough, but the continuity that they are going to have, I mean, nothing changes, right? There's nothing for the offense to process and change, right? Like all they have to do is keep getting better at what they already have gotten good at. And that is another reason why I'm like, my optimism is just limitless right now. It's like, I'm excited for everything we've got here. Because you could return this team without adding a single person, and we could be excited about it. But instead, you've got 11 draft picks. You got the potential for a couple of free agents. You got a hanging David Bakhtiari trade that might happen. That's a whole other topic. Maybe we'll get into that next week. There's no urgency to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways that this team gets like significantly better this offseason, not just a little bit better. So that's what we should be looking at. And I get it. Like, everybody wants to be cautiously optimistic. We don't want to like come out like, oh yeah, we're going to the Super Bowl. And then we look like idiots when we don't. I don't care. I'll look like an idiot. It's too much fun to be in this position. And the thing that gives me this perspective is look where the Bears are. Look where they are. Look where the Bears are. A year ago, have they gotten anywhere? Have they gone anywhere from a year ago?
They still don't have a quarterback. I mean, and that's the biggest thing. They're going to get a quarterback in the draft. I mean, I can't see him keeping Fields. I hope they do, but I don't think they keep Fields. I think they draft a quarterback and start all over.
See, I'm on the other side of that. I hope they blow it up because I think Fields eventually, I think he has the talent, but Fields, to me, he's just been running for his life his whole career in the NFL.
I don't think it's ever going to happen with him and the Bears. He needs a fresh start. I know they got a new coordinator, but I don't think it's going to matter a whole lot. I haven't seen enough improvement in him as a passer, especially standing in the pocket to say like, this dude's going to take off next year. I don't see it. So I'm hoping they keep him because I don't think he's ever going to be anything spectacular. I mean, I don't think he's a total bum or anything like that, but I don't fear him. Whereas, there probably takes, Caleb Williams and they're ruining him anyway, which will be great. But, I think there's more of a factor of like, he might be really good. Whereas I don't think Justin Fields is ever going to be really good.
See, coming out of college, I was way more worried about Justin Fields. I mean, I said to myself, watching Justin Fields at Ohio State, God, I hope he doesn't go to the Bears. I said that. Like I remember that. I've never said that about Caleb Williams. And I'm probably in the minority on this. I just don't see it. Yes, he's talented. He can make throws. He can do that. But when you're the quarterback at USC, Lincoln Riley is your head coach. And I know I'm going to rile people up when I bring this up because wins aren't a quarterback stat. Dude never won a bowl game at USC. Like, he didn't win big games. And it's like, yeah, well, there's a team and all this other stuff. Now, man, when you talk about great quarterbacks, they put the team on their back and they win games. Like, that's – you see that. You can see it in their play. Maybe it doesn't always happen, but that, like, generally a good quarterback wins games. And Caleb Williams didn't. And that's the part I can't get over. I cannot get over that. And then there's, some of this other stuff, and I'm not here to hate on a guy for being emotional or anything. I don't see him having the mental toughness that is required to be a good NFL quarterback, especially one who's going to be thrown to the fire like Caleb Williams undoubtedly will be. He's not going to sit on the bench. You don't draft a guy like that to put him on the bench. So you got to be a mentally tough SOB to be a good quarterback in the NFL. You look around, look at the guys who have been good at it. Like, there's some tough sons of guns. And I just don't see that. Like, I haven't seen like a tough moment from Caleb Williams, like where he's like, dang, man. Like, and this is kind of biased too, because I being down here in Texas, but man, Vince Young, you saw Vince Young put the Longhorns on his back and beat USC in that Rose Bowl. He did that. And that's just like kind of a random example, because now that's like a while ago, almost 20 years ago. I can't believe that.
And he didn't work out in the pros.
So maybe that's a terrible example. But I guess what I'm saying, that might be there's a deeper conversation there, because he started out okay. He made the Pro Bowl as a rookie, and then Jeff Fisher did what Jeff Fisher does. But there's these guys. You see them all over. But Andrew Luck won games. Trevor Lawrence won games. If you're going to call this guy a generational talent like these other guys, they won games. And he just didn't. And that's what, for me, I'm like, yeah, sure. Go ahead, Bears. Draft Caleb Williams. Let's see how this goes. And I think a Caleb Williams would do very well like with the Steelers or the Patriots. A very well-established organization that has a strong established culture of this is the way things are, and fall in line and learn how to lead it, right? I mean, that's really what they want from the quarterback in those positions. Going to Chicago, man, it's like the opposite of that. Like, they've never had a good quarterback ever.
And it just seems like you're going to give that to Matt Eberflus, who he ain't the right head coach to develop them. So like, if they don't win next year, they'll probably get rid of the head coach Eberflus. So then you're starting over again with another head coach. Like, it's just a cycle. Like
weird
Trubisky and Fields.
Misses.
And I mean, I'm glad it's happening, but it's just it's weird how they do things. But yeah, it's
confusing to me. But that's where I am very, very grateful to be a Packers fan, because like the Patriots and the Steelers, the Packers have a very well established culture. The organization does what it does. And like, it is not like, no player is bigger than that organization. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre have shown that. Other guys that have come and gone that maybe we wish would have been better taken care of or whatever, but it works, man. Like, it may not be perfect. We may not like it all the time, but it works. And you see that now. And they do it in the right order. Whereas like teams like the Bears, I don't feel like they do these things in the right order. They think like, oh, well, this guy is a top, like what they did with Trubisky. They go up, they try to get this guy, like, he's the guy. We're good now. Okay, well, you don't give him good coaching. You don't give him an offensive line. You don't give him good weapons. Like, at what point is it not the quarterback's fault? And that's that. I'm almost rooting for the simulation theory to be busted by them drafting Drake May. It's just like, man, a top UNC quarterback that comes out, and and then of course Trubisky, they passed over Mahomes. In this draft, if you get Drake May and Caleb Williams actually pans out, like, man, it's just poetry at that point.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Anyway, enough about the Bears. So as far as this offseason goes, obviously we got some draft coverage that we want to get to here pretty soon. But let's have a little fun with free agency thought here, man. And I had some fun with a post earlier where I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was PFF Packers. They were entertaining the idea that the Packers would sign Josh Jacobs this offseason. I'm like, what? Was there any thought that went into that at all?
No,
or was this just like a little clickbait, engagement bait? Like, what was that?
It's a waste of a post. Waste of time.
Well, and that was my word. I think most Packers fans generally agreed with that, but there, of course, were a few chimed in and, well, you don't know ball if that's what you think. It's like, man, all right, well, I don't know ball because I don't want Josh Jacobs. But if you could hand pick a free agent, man, who you bringing in?
Antoine Winfield Jr.
Hear, hear.
I mean, he's a stud safety. I guess I don't know if he's pro ball, pro, whatever whatever he got, but he's just a stud. And he's been like that since he got in the NFL. And it's a huge position of need. So yeah, he would be my guy. And that's not even looking at all the free agents that are out there, but I can tell you he's a potential free agent. I can't see him getting away from Tampa, but you never know, like, because we hit on early, like, safeties aren't getting paid. So maybe he comes in with some kind of high demand and Tampa says, we're not paying you that. You're a safety, like, go to the market. And he's out.
We don't know their salary cap situation.
Right. And the Packers, I know Goody said that they can beat players in free agency. I'll believe it when I see it. Like, I think they're going to sign a couple guys, but I think it's going to be mid-level or lower-level salaries. I don't think you're going to see like the big signings like they did with Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith and Adrian Amos. There's cap clears up next offseason where that could be the window where they do add, a couple big free agents. I don't think it'll be this year, but maybe they're able to do it. Maybe somebody's number isn't as high as expected, and I think they're going to clear up a lot of cap room with Bakhtiari because I think they're going to move on. But yeah, I mean, maybe they're able to get aggressive and get one guy, but if they had that ability, Antoine Winfield Jr. would be a home run for them, for this new defense, for any defense. But he's a stud, so he would be my guy. What about you?
Well, I don't want to pick the same guy as you, so I won't. But if you hadn't said it, I would have. This is an interesting thought because in the post about Josh Jacobs got me thinking about this. Like, shoot, man, where would that money be spent? And shout out to Ken Ingalls on hopefully I said his name right on Twitter. Salary cap guru.
He's great.
He's an excellent follow. If you don't follow Ken Ingalls, you should. Nobody covers the Packers salary cap like he does. He's phenomenal, and he essentially, and this was maybe a week or a couple weeks ago now, but he outlined how the Packers could free up to $80 million in cap, and that's it wasn't like totally unreasonable, right? It did include a few moves. I think getting rid of Bakhtiari was one of them. Re-signing Love was one, but it wasn't some outrageous maneuver to get to $80 million. But again, it was like a combination of things, right? It's not like
a million different things happen.
Right. The Packers aren't going to do all of those things, but the point was to illustrate, like, hey, if they want to find the money, they can. And it's not even like it was a couple years ago where they were doing the kick the can thing down the road. These are just moves that would free up cap space this offseason, which is really nice. We're not playing this kick the can down the road game anymore. You're actually in a very advantageous position with the salary cap right now. And that the reason for that is how young the roster is. But yeah, so as far as that goes, I think if there was somebody like a Winfield that they were like, this is the guy. Like we gotta go get this guy. I think they could do it. Now, the Packers are obviously never going to overpay. They're never going to do the Albert Hainsworth signing. If you're too young to know who Albert Hainsworth is, just look it up and learn. But, yeah, they shouldn't. Right, I agree with you. They should not do that. But if there is a guy that they believe, like, hey, this one, like a Charles Woodson type signing, and I say that, and some of you are like, there's no Charles Woodson out there this offseason. Well, when they signed Charles Woodson in 2006, he was considered a kind of a washed up, not much left, injury prone. Charles Woodson was not a splash signing in free agency.
Green Bay was the only team. They were the only team.
Yeah, they signed him in like May, right? So this is well after the free agency buzz. It was after the draft. He was kind of a Devondre Campbell kind of signing.
He didn't want to go to Green Bay. He was waiting for somebody else to come in and offer him more money.
That's right.
And nobody did.
That's right. And he said that he didn't want to go to Green Bay. And then he got to Green Bay. He's like, oh, I like this place. But yeah, so I guess to come all the way back around to, you know, who would be my pick of free agent. It's hard not to say Winfield because you don't have glaring holes at these other positions. You know, there's just not a ton of positions where you're like, man, we really need to fill that hole like right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think safety, there's a few safeties out there, like Geno Stone from Baltimore just had a really good year. Now, you know, all these Baltimore coaches getting either head coaching or defensive coordinator jobs, you're going to have competition because they're all probably going to want to sign him. But
of course,
yeah, he's out there. And there's a few other safeties. Like I think that's one position where it's obviously a big need. They may be able to get out there and find one starter in free agency at safety, you know, an upgrade over what Jonathan Owens and Rudy Ford were and Darnell Savage. So I think that's one spot. But you know, like they're not going to go out and pay a pass rusher. I think they could draft a pass rusher, but they're not going to pay him because those guys get paid. I don't think they're going to go out there and pay a corner unless it's like a cheaper veteran. I think they would more likely draft a corner.
Yeah.
So to me, the most obvious, position would be safety.
Yeah. And I'm over here now. I've got the list of them from spottrack.com. And yeah, there's just not a lot of names that jump out here. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to pick something different, but I think Winfield's the guy. And I'll say this, I'll go even further. Goody had his press conference, I guess, what was that, last week or maybe over the weekend? Not very long ago, a few days ago. Mm-hmm. His tone to me sounded like, hey, maybe we had an idea before the 2023 season of how things would be in the next offseason, and I think that changed. I think the way that they made they made the playoffs, beat the Cowboys, had the 49ers on the ropes. I think the way Goody sees this roster now is win now. I really feel like, and this was just from his tone, this is not reading into quotes or anything that y'all haven't heard. Go back and watch his most recent press conference and tell me that the tone doesn't sound like a guy that like really seriously means business right now. But yeah, I mean, he really does. He sounds like a guy that's like, hey, we have a team that's in position to win a Super Bowl right now, and I'm not messing around. Like, he was very direct in his answers about Jair. Are you going to trade Jair? No. Okay, well, what about Aaron Jones? We want him back. Okay, what about David Bakhtiari?
Well, that was the one where he danced around.
Yeah, it's like, well,
but he did also say, to your point, like, he'd come out and said they're going to work on an extension for Jordan Love too.
Yeah. I mean, he was on, and there was no BS. There was no, well, maybe this. You never know how things, just could this, could that. GMs should generally talk like that because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
The tone that Goody has to me says he knows what he's got right now, and he's not going to waste it. So that gets me very excited about what we could see this offseason, moves we could see. You know, you've seen him be aggressive in free agency before, right? When we first got in, you know, his first offseason, you get the Smith brothers, you get Adrian Amos, you know, you get a haul of free agents. So he's shown that he will do that, right? We're not dealing with Ted Thompson here. When you have a player out there like a Winfield, we as fans see him as like a no-brainer. If Goot sees him that way too, I mean, he should be in the running. The Packers should be in the running for that player. Even if Tampa Bay is trying to re-sign him, do you try to trade for him? Or do you try to trade for an equivalent player? You know, is there another really strong safety out there on a team that might need an offensive tackle?
Yeah. I mean, the Bakhtiari thing, we can get into salary cap another time, but a trade it's very unlikely just because they take such a big cap hit to trade him.
Yep,
where it doesn't make it. It's either going to be they're going to cut him or keep him, and it's most likely they're going to cut him. I think that, like you said, that was the one answer there. He really danced around it. Aaron Jones is coming back. Jordan Love's getting an extension. They're not trading Jair Bakhtiari. Well, he danced around it. So
yeah.
He did bring up, and I don't know, it's probably a throwaway line, but he did mention with all the draft picks, with 11 of them this year, that maybe they trade for a veteran player. They use one on, you know, they trade some for, we'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. It's not really what they do, but you have 11 draft picks, 5 of them in the top 100. You have some flexibility there as far as what you want to do. I could see them adding a starter, maybe 2 in free agency, but I don't think they're going to be at the top of the market. Like when they played Za'Darius Smith and Preston Smith, they paid those guys top dollar. I don't see them doing that this year. That might be next offseason. But I could see them being aggressive for maybe guys that don't have quite the market that they were expecting.
That second tier of free agent.
And that to me is like safety. That's what it looks, because safety's like, you see Jesse Bates got a big deal last offseason, but that was kind of like an outlier.
Yeah.
You don't see safeties get paid. So there could be some guys that go out, you know, that make their way to free agency and they can jump on them and you know, go get one of them.
Yeah. And I hope they do. But it just, if we have a fun offseason ahead of us, and the GM sounds serious. That's all I can say right now. But
he seemed comfortable. Like, this is his team. He doesn't have the Rodgers drama where the expectations, like, we're going to run it back and we're going to keep kicking the can down the road with all these contracts and, you know, pushing out void years and keeping guys around to try to make another run at it. It kind of feels like this is the team that he built. Yeah. And it's kind of like they took a step that probably surprised him, making the playoffs and winning a game and being really close to getting to the championship. Yeah, so like he seemed like more confident and more comfortable with this team than he has in prior years, with that dark cloud of like win it all or it's a bust, you know, and figuring out the Rodgers drama, you know, the last 3 years or whatever it was. It just he seemed, I don't know, just more comfortable in the state of the team where they are right now.
Yeah, he did. And that's what I mean, is like, he sounded like a GM that meant business in that press conference. It had a very different tone than previous press conferences to me. But yeah, you know, and like you're saying, he alluded to maybe you consolidate draft picks. I don't see where you're putting 11 new bodies on this team.
That's the other thing. And yeah, that's another thing I've been thinking of. Like, I can't see 11 rookies making it.
No.
And there's going to be like, there might be 7th round picks who get cut, or there might be, a couple guys that get injured in training camp, but you're still drafting them with the expectation that these 11 guys are making your team.
Yeah. You just don't need 11 new bodies. And so why wouldn't you consolidate those picks? And he's right to be vague about that, because you can consolidate at any time. You consolidate day 1 to get back into the first round. You consolidate day 2 to get back into second or third round. You consolidate day 3 to get into the fourth round. There's a lot of ways he can do that, and there's other ways that they can package those things together, like he mentioned, for a veteran player or something. That's what got my attention, is these guys. I say this a lot when we're trying to figure out something that's going on with a player or something. You have to pay attention to the things that these guys say that they don't have to say, right? Him saying that we've got a lot of draft picks that we could move for a veteran player, I mean, that he didn't have to say that. And it's like you're saying, that's not something they've historically done. So that to me is like, this man, I think, already has his eye on some people. I think he already knows some players that he would target in a trade. And again, what's the situation, right? And we kind of did a little of this last year with Rodgers, but do you trade before the draft so that you know what you have going into the draft and what you kind of need to do in the draft? Or do you let the draft fall to you and then move afterwards, kind of reactionary to like, okay, well, we didn't get these things in the draft, so now we need to, right? So like if you don't get the safety you want, now you need to try to trade for a veteran. That I think is kind of a tale as old a time question, right? Like there's no GM's going to answer that for you, but I don't think they can. Like you really just have to see how things unfold. Like with Rodgers, right? It all kind of a bunch of speculation and then boom, happens all at once. So yeah, again, there's just a lot of reasons for excitement. You know, that in previous off seasons, Packers fans, we have had to like remove the Bird app from your phone. Don't go on Twitter. Don't watch NFL Network. Don't listen to Shefty the clown, because you're just going to get bombarded with nonsense. You know, it's Rodgers this, it's leverage that, it's Goot's an idiot, it's the Jets GM's a genius. All these things, you know, and I bring up Shefty the clown a lot because in 2021, he was just outwardly lying, right? Like, and he got caught in that. And the fact that I remember a time, I'm old enough to remember a time that when journalists lie, they would be ousted for that, but he didn't, he wasn't. And now he's off spouting, look, I think that the Bears are going to draft Caleb Williams. Well, who are you? Are you not Ryan Poles? Get out of here, man. So that to me is like, we have lived through these off seasons the last few years, and now we're just like in this nice place. We're just
Don't jinx it.
We're in this nice. No, I'm not jinxing anything now. We're here. We are here. But we're in this nice place where it's like, hey, we've got a franchise quarterback. Hey, we've got a pretty good offense. Hey, we got a new defensive coordinator. Hey, we got loaded defense with talent. Like it's just very fun to look around and go, you have less holes than you have capital to fill them. Oh, all right. Now what? And this actually, I got to this thought by having the discourse about Josh Jacobs. What happens when you have too much salary cap? What do? Right? Shoot, that's a good problem to have. You don't go off and buy things you don't need, okay? So just because you have the cap doesn't mean you go get Josh Jacobs. Someone else illustrated a beautiful point. You do not, in this NFL day and age, invest $30 million in the running back position, all right? You don't do it. It doesn't happen. If you look at the Super Bowl winners over like the last 15 years, the highest salary was like $2.5 million. So you don't do that. That's not what winners do. What do? Well, you fill your holes, right? We talk about safety. Then you start re-signing guys and you front load those contracts. That's where I think Goot is the most excited right now, because you can front load a Jordan Love right now, make him real happy because he's going to get paid, and he's not a problem in the future. He's not your problem in a few years when he could be. And this is all relative because he's probably still going to get like $50 million a year, which is outrageous. But he's earned it. You know, it's not outrageous that he would get it. He deserves it. That's the market for quarterbacks right now. So yeah, it's a great position to be in, and we really should enjoy this, because who knows what hell's going to break loose next offseason, or, before we know it, Jordan Love's going to be wondering if he's going to retire or not.
He's going to be on his darkness retreats.
Going to do ayahuasca in the Amazon. It really didn't feel like 16 years between Favre and Rodgers? It didn't feel like that. It went by pretty quick. So enjoy these off seasons, guys, when we have these positions, when we have the team where it is, because this is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to talk about these things. Not have to talk about, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be back in Green Bay. No, who cares? Doesn't matter anymore. We know our quarterback's going to be back. You know our quarterback's working with his receivers. We know that this team is only going to get better. And that, my friends, is worth being excited about.
That's right.
So we are a little deep into this podcast. We got kind of long-winded on our optimism. So we may hold our draft talk until next week. We're still early in this process, right? We got the combine coming up in a couple of weeks. But the first positions we were going to go over were going to be offensive tackle and edge rush. So we were looking at potential day one targets. And this is specifically for the Packers, right? So like Joe Alt out of Notre Dame. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time with him. He's really good, guys. He's going to be like a top 10, top 5 pick. Oh, there goes my light. But yeah, so we're going to try to get into the guys that the Packers actually might take, right? And so we'll get into that. But are there any off the top of your head, Tim, that you want to tell people to watch out for?
I mean, I think it's still early in the process, especially, pre-combine here. We don't have their measurements. And I think that's going to be a big deal for the Packers, as if they've shown over the years. They need to know not only height, weight, but they need to know how they test. And so until we have that, I don't think we have a true picture of like who's a Packer guy, who's not, because they stick to those measurements so strictly. And, offensive tackle is one of those positions where they're going to look at it. But I think just overall as a picture for the Packers, right now it may not look like a huge need because it looks like Rasheed Walker's the left tackle going forward. But if it were me, I would still be on the lookout at somebody that can play tackle for you. And if there's someone there in the first 2 days, even if you think Rasheed Walker is going to be your starter next year, I'd still take him, because you got to build depth at least. I don't expect Yash back, so you at least need a swing tackle. And you just need depth overall on the offensive line. And if for some reason, if Rasheed Walker struggles next year as a full-time starter, it'd be nice to have somebody ready to go, as a replacement for him. So to me, I still think, offensive tackle is pretty high up on that list. You can really clump it in with the entire offensive line, because I think they need to build depth and competition, especially at center and right guard. But yeah, if you can get a left tackle early that you really like, I wouldn't hesitate. I'm fine with keeping Zach Tom at right tackle. I'm not worried there. It's more so on the left side.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Now, the one thing we talked about, Packers have a system, right, and it works. One thing that they've done very well historically is they've drafted linemen that are versatile. So they've drafted guys that, maybe they were a tackle in college, but they project more as a guard in the NFL, but they could also play center if they have to. Like these, like Zach Tom is a great example of it. He can play any position on the offensive line. I would watch for them to draft guys like that. And the beauty of being in a position that they're in right now is you truly can take the best player available. Now, again, like we said, if you're in that position where it's like, all right, there's only one more first-round grade left on the board, and he's a quarterback, we're not going to take a first-round quarterback, let's trade out, fine. But there's a lot of times where we as fans are rooting for them to fill a need with these picks, and GMs just don't want to do that. Like they really have established that you don't draft for need. And now that I've at least seen a few NFL seasons, it makes sense. You see what happens, and like the Cowboys when they take CeeDee Lamb, they already had a loaded receiver core. But you're not passing on CeeDee Lamb. He was easily the best player available at that point in the draft. So you take him, and you get, better at a position you were already good at. And now, you look at it, you're like, okay, well, seems about right? Like they did need to take that guy. You trade away Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup's all right, but he's not, the receiver one that at one point he looked like he could be. And so there you go. Like, it made sense in hindsight to take CeeDee Lamb. And so that's where I think with the Packers, it can be frustrating when they take somebody that they've already, it's like, oh man, like with Rashawn Gary, it's like, man, they took Rashawn Gary. Like, we got the Smith twins, like, we're pretty good. Like, why'd they do that? When you can do that, it seems like it's the best way to go, because you're truly going to get a great player that eventually will be the guy. The guys that are there will cycle out. So I'm just excited for the ability for the Packers to take best player available and for us to be excited about it regardless of what it is, right? It could be D-line, O-line. I mean, just across the board, short of a running back. They go taking a running back in the first round, my eyebrows are going to go up. I don't think it'll happen, though.
No.
But yeah, that's what I would watch for. There are a few guys that could be available late first round and second round that would make sense. The center out of Oregon looks like one to keep an eye on. He looks like a pretty strong candidate. And there's a few other guys. We're going to get into them, like, so kind of deep into this podcast now, so we're not going to get long-winded on these positions. But I would, watch for the Packers to take a guy that, like you just described, Tim, he can be sort of an insurance policy if the left tackle position doesn't work out the way it looks like it's going to. But if that's not needed, right, if the left, Rasheed Walker works out, maybe you get a guy that also can play guard and be really good, right? Like, that's what I would watch for. One thing that I think kind of tosses things up as we start looking at draft prospects and who could be a good fit, I don't know what Hafley's going to want for the defense, right? Like, we don't know what he's looking for as far as, like, does he need another big body in the middle of the D line? Does he need, is he going to have the massive priority on safety? Like, we think he probably will, right? There's a lot of defensive back coaching experience on this team now. You just don't know. You don't know what they're going to prefer. And that's, I think, what's going to be most interesting throughout this process, because we're not going to get a lot of information, right? This is poker until the draft happens. We know that. We've seen that. So I think what we have to do is we just have to look historically at how things have gone and what makes the most sense.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, is like what they're going to look for on defense. I don't think it's going to be anything like drastic where they, and Goody said they're not going to be blowing up the defense, but there may be certain types that he wants for his defense that they don't have right now. And certainly, like we've talked about, they don't have safety, so that's definitely going to be a priority. I think corner should be a priority, and I could also see, off-ball linebacker, because I think it's more likely they're going to move on from Campbell. So you're going to, even if you think McDuffie can be a starter, you're going to need depth, and you're going to need a third guy to go with Quay Walker and with Isaiah McDuffie. But yeah, part of that's going to be like, what does Hafley want specifically for the defense? So what can they target in the draft?
One scenario that I brought up that I thought would be kind of just ironic and poetic a little bit is if they sign Patrick Queen in the offseason. He was up there with one of the players that everybody wanted with that 2020 first round pick. And wouldn't it just be hilarious if Goot went off and got him, said, there, now are you guys happy? You got the guy you wanted, and we got our franchise quarterback. So I think that would be a good move. It would be interesting. Patrick Queen, he's a good NFL linebacker, right? I think that did he get all pro?
I don't know. I know he wasn't very, like, he was struggling, but this year was kind of like his breakout. Yeah, this was his breakout year. Now he's playing next to Roquan Smith, and he's playing in that system. So that probably had a lot to do with it, but he did have a nice year for the Ravens. Yeah,
he did. Okay, so here we go. We got, and actually his rookie season, he got votes for Defensive Rookie of the Year. But he was second team All-Pro this season. So yeah, I mean that's a guy that could step in, and you could sign him for probably a reasonable amount, and have him next to Quay Walker, and man, you got a set of off-ball linebackers right there that rival. I mean, they're probably the best linebackers you've had since the Lombardi era. I mean, my God, how fun would that be? And we kind of had that a little bit with Campbell and Walker, but both of them had a hard time being on the field at the same time with injury issues and stuff. So it'd be cool to see that, get somebody next to Quay Walker that has the speed and athleticism that he does, and now you've really got a defense that's capable of a lot of things, and having a guy like, for the longest time we had AJ Hawk, right? And AJ Hawk was, steady and true, but he wasn't a playmaker, right? He was just a tackler. He was just sort of a stopgap in the middle of the defense, but he wasn't allowing you to do certain things, like Quay Walker chasing down Justin Fields to keep him out of the end zone. AJ Hawk was never doing that, and the other guys like, that they've had, and even Brad Jones, Super Bowl, right? Like he was one of the linebackers on your Super Bowl team. Solid guy, but not even close to what Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell or like Patrick Queen or another athletic off-ball linebacker would be. So I agree with you there. I think that'd be a fun one to see them plug in. I just think that the irony around getting Patrick Queen would just be awesome. I would love that. Yeah. But shoot, man, we got a lot we can look into. A lot to talk about this offseason. Got a lot to talk about for the draft. All good problems to have, though. And the one thing that I said to one of the other podcasts is, by the end of this offseason, all the other teams, the fans of the Bears, the Vikings, the Lions, they're going to be picking the Packers to win the division next year. The Packers are going to be the NFC North winners. Like, the Kings of the North are back. So that's where I'm at. If you disagree, whatever.
Let's hope so.
So, well, sir, it's getting late here. We have gone almost an hour and a half into this podcast. I believe this is officially our longest episode that we've had. So we'll go ahead and get this thing cut short. But next week, tune in. We will be back on Monday. We will be going into a little bit more draft talk, I think. This one, we really had to get into the defensive staff that we've got now. That's been the fun topic since the last episode. So we had to get into all of that. But now, I mean, we've got the defensive staff in place. You got a lot of pieces in place, and now it's going to be draft and free agency. So we're going to be hot and heavy on that next week. But y'all let us know. Let us know if there's something else we need to be talking about, people we need to be looking at. The Senior Bowl. Heck, we didn't even talk about the Senior Bowl, but we can probably get into that as we talk about individual players and draft prospects. So, but I do want to say thank y'all for joining us this week on the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I don't think I said that on the opening. Please, y'all, if you're watching us on YouTube or wherever you're watching us, spike that like button. Give us a follow. Give us all the, whatever the social media stuff is on the app that you're using. It's all free to you, takes seconds, and it means a lot to us, so we would greatly appreciate the support. And Packers fans, we will see y'all next week. Go, Pack, go.